Someone suggested I make a video on the Drakthir Evokers, so here we are. Evokers are probably one of the most divisive parts about Dragonflight. People seem to either love them or hate them. Personally, I haven't really thought about them much, as I've been too busy leveling way too many alts, but I guess it's time to give them a go. Now, I want to break this up into two parts, the first being on how they function thematically in WoW. Things like aesthetics, story, lore, and other such things. And the second part being about how they function mechanically within the game. Alright, so jumping into the character creator, they have a lot of customization options. Now I know a lot of people hate how they look, but personally, I don't mind it. I'm a huge fan of the Dragonborn and Kobolds from D&D, and I think the Drakthir look pretty good. I will say though, that they look super awkward without any armor on, so I'm not a fan of that. Also, I would like if they had some more muscular builds, kind of like how the dragon can do. The animations look pretty good, so no complaints there. On the visage side of things, I'm kind of disappointed. Abyssian gets to be a Tauren, so why can't I? I'm not really a fan of the elf thing that you can turn into, but as far as I know, you don't ever have to use it outside of a single quest at the end of the starting area, so it's not really a big deal. As for the story, I think it's alright. It was established back in vanilla that the Black Dragons were experimenting to create new creatures. Nefarian was kind of a mad scientist, and we saw more of that from Deathwing and Cataclysm, so I don't really have any problems with it. Overall, thematically, I kinda like them. I know it's not for everyone, but honestly, is there a single race in WoW that is? I think they could use a little more customization options, even though they already have way more than any of the other races, but that's a pretty minor thing for me. Alright, let's move on to the mechanics. I'm not a huge fan of the fact that they can only be one class. I think they should at least have warriors and rogues, but Blizzard has said that they will consider it in future expansions, so I'll stop complaining about that for now. And before I get into the Evoker class specifically, I want to say that I'm really disappointed in the soar ability. It should really function as a dragon riding mount on the Dragon Isles, and they should be able to fly normally everywhere else. A dragon riding a dragon looks dumb in my opinion. As for the Evoker class itself, I think it has a lot of potential, but barely any of it is realized. Let's start with the empowered spells. I like how they function in theory, but in practice, I find them to be clunky. Mainly because you also have spells that use normal casting, and switching between them constantly makes me mess up the charging function. Maybe I'm just not used to it yet, or maybe I'm just bad at it. Then there's the fact that it's almost always optimal to just use rank 1 spells, which makes it feel kinda lame. Personally, I think all their spells should function as empowered spells, but maybe they should do their damage every time they reach a new level. So for example, if you start casting a spell and get it up to level 5, it would do damage 5 times during the cast, and at each level it would do more damage than the previous. I'm also not a fan of how Fire Breath and Eternity Surge are just on a 30-second cooldown, and you just use it on CD without really thinking about it. I thought they were supposed to be abilities that you had to think about how to use. Personally, I would take the cooldown away, and make them cost a resource of some kind. Maybe Disintegrate could give you a stacking buff every time it dealt damage, and casting either Eternity Surge or Fire Breath would cost a stack per level of cast. And the dot from Fire Breath could be a stacking debuff that begins losing stacks if the target isn't hit with the spell for a period of time. I think something like that would make the rotation a bit more interesting, but I'm not a game developer, so my ideas should probably not be taken too seriously. I'm just saying that it can be made more interesting, and it should be. I mean, Blizzard claimed this was an advanced class, but its optimal rotation is actually one of the simplest in the game. I want to briefly talk about Deep Breath. It's one of the DPS cooldowns Evokers have, and it looks really cool. But again, it's awkward to use. I don't like that it moves you towards your targets. It just feels counterintuitive as a caster. There's a talent that lets you teleport back to your original spot, but it just feels clunky. I think the spell just shouldn't move you at all. Next, let's talk about their main resource, Essence. Honestly, I'm not that impressed by it. It's basically Death Knight runes, but they don't have the runic power side to make it more interesting. To me, it just feels like a watered down energy bar. Personally, I think it should be more like runic power or rage, in that you would go from 0 to 100, and you only get it from using other abilities. But maybe it should regen out of combat so you can start a fight with a full bar. And I think Disintegrate should drain it over time, kinda like Mind Seer for Shadow Priests, instead of all at the start. As for the mana bar, I'm honestly not sure why it's even there for DPS Evokers. It serves no real purpose, as it's basically impossible to go I don't really play healers a whole lot, but a lot of the people that I know that do don't really like having a secondary resource for mana, like Holy Power or Chi, but I imagine that some do, so I'm not going to say one way or another about that. Now for the whole mid-range 25-yard thing. I feel like this was a case of it sounded good on paper, but in practice, it's just annoying. Caster DPS and healers having their range limited by almost half doesn't feel very good. I don't think it really adds anything to the class either. It only holds it back. Some people are asking for a tank spec, and as a player who plays primarily tanks, I'd be down for it. Just give them shields, the ability to block, dodge, and parry while casting, and get rid of spellcasting pushback. You could even keep the 25-yard range for them as a tank since they would just be in melee anyways. But Blizzard has pretty much said no to that, so I guess I'll just have to dream. They should probably just work on the foundation of the class first before they consider adding new specs to it anyways. And since we're on the subject of tanks, I want to mention how squishy Evokers feel. For a class that wears mail armor, it sure feels like I'm getting hit pretty hard. Yes, I know casters are kinda supposed to be squishy, but the Shadow Priest that I leveled felt way bulkier than the Evoker does, and the self-healing I can do as an Evoker feels negligible at best, compared to the near constant power word shield I can maintain on the Priest. Put that on top of being limited to 25 yards, and I just feel like I'm way more likely to die on my Evoker than any of my other characters. Maybe that's just me though, and maybe I just need to learn how to play the game better. Like I said earlier, I think the class has a lot of potential, but it feels like it's being dragged down by ideas that sounded cool on paper and mechanics that are different for the sake of being different. I get it. They want each class to feel unique, but if something doesn't work, then it doesn't work. The class feels unfinished. At least to me, that is. Regardless, I'm interested in seeing how they change over the expansion, and I think I'll keep this character geared up just in case they get some really cool changes in the future. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and have a nice day.